Good afternoon, everyone. Oh my gosh, I'm so nervous because this is such a big event for us and our partners. So yeah, welcome to our kickoff event, and also this event is part of the Head Foundation's dialogues. I am Tricia Octaviano, and I manage the academic affairs in the Asia Pacific region. And we're officially launching today our Kids Cyber Resilience Project. So thank you so very much for joining us for this special event. Um, I'm from Kaspersky, and Kaspersky is one of the world's largest privately owned cybersecurity companies. This Kids Cyber Resilience Project is a multi-stakeholder project with teachers, parents, and students to help kids build cyber resilience. And so I'm very, very excited because just like many of you, I was also a teacher. I started at 15 years old and I taught for 7 years at a nonprofit organization. And you can see why this project means a lot to me. We've partnered with the Center for Cybersecurity and the Head Foundation because we believe that a collaborative and proactive approach to online safety can result in a positive online experience for children. And I'm overwhelmed with gratitude because this project won't be possible without, of course, the support of our partners and my team, Kaspersky Academy, who is actually joining us live from HQ. So that's it. Without further ado, I'd like to introduce our first speaker to give his welcome remarks, Dr. Wan Chang. He is the Chief Executive Officer of the Head Foundation. He holds a PhD from the University of Oxford and was trained as an economist at the University of Malaya and the National University of Singapore. As an academic, he has a strong interest in higher education in Southeast Asia and the Global South. Dr. Wan, please come to the stage.
Thank you, Tricia. Welcome, everyone. On behalf of the Head Foundation, take this opportunity to welcome you all to this edition of the Head Foundation Dialogues. Let me just take this opportunity to briefly introduce the foundation and our role in this dialogue. The Head Foundation is a charitable organization with a mission to improve lives in Asia, or Southeast Asia more specifically, through quality education and effective healthcare. And as part of our public advocacy and also engagement with the public, we organize a monthly THF dialogues. This is a series of public talks in areas usually in education and healthcare, but we also explore other topics of interest to the society at large, reaching out to our networks and our collaborators and people who follow our work in the region especially. And today we are very honored to have Kaspersky as well as the Center for Cybersecurity to partner with us to discuss this topic on cyber resilience through education. It's close to our heart in the foundation because this whole notion of cyber education is part and parcel of today's discussion about education. And we cannot run away from talking about cybersecurity and the various issues relating to learning in the cyber world that we are confronted with today. So we are very glad to be able to partner with Kaspersky's lab to hear from them some of the developments in education in related to cyber resilience, as well as also from the Center for Cybersecurity with us. And without further ado, I'll let the experts in the room to share with us and share with us and what we can actually take on board to learn from this, not only as educators, not only as experts in cybersecurity, but also many of us wear the hats of parents. We also have children who are dealing with cyber issues, who's engaging themselves in the cyber world. And I think that this is of a very much of an interest to every one of us. And I wish everyone, and especially take this opportunity to thank the speakers who is going to share with us from different perspective on this whole topic of cyber resilience. And once again, thank you and welcome to this edition of the THF Dialogues. Back to you, Tricia.
Thank you so much, Dr. Wan Chang. We need to liven up this room, I think. And I can't do it alone, so I need company. Maybe I should ask help from someone to do it. Can you come over? Oh, he's a bit shy. Please come. Wait, let's call him Midori. Midori, please come on in.
Come in.
Please, a round of applause. Are you excited today, Midori? Aww, me as well. So are you excited to introduce our next speaker? Actually, he needs no introduction, right? Do you agree? Ah, very good. Our next speaker is the co-founder and chief executive officer of the company that proudly bears his name. He's a world-renowned cybersecurity expert, and we are privileged that he's joining us in this launch event. I'd like to invite Mr. Eugene Kaspersky.
Thank you, and hello everybody. I'll be short. We are living in a cyber age, right? So the cyber is everywhere around us, in our pockets, on our tables, in the fire alarm systems, in the streets, everywhere. So we need security, we need safety. That's why we do a lot of technologies, products to protect individual security, cybersecurity, businesses, industrial sector, Internet of Things, everything. But to make this world even more resilient to cyber threats, we need to educate people. That's why we have a lot of trainings for very different audiences, for IT security professionals, for students, just for different kind of audiences and kids. Because, well, we need to being in cyber age, because I remember this world before internet. Who else remember the world before internet? Plus to me. So, well, actually, I think that we are lucky generation because we remember the world before cyber, and we enjoy this world living in a cyber. So we need to educate, we need to train, especially kids. Like we educate our kids how to swim, how to cross the streets. And we need to educate how to behave with the internet, not to be easy victims of the bad guys and follow the necessary rules in cyber. And maybe some kids learning more about cybersecurity, maybe they will choose this way of the professional career. Well, cybersecurity is very, 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 very interesting area, correct? Yes. So it's cybersecurity. It's a combination of technologies, analysis, machine learning. So it's a cutting edge of all this cyber plus mathematics. Plus, I have to understand behavior of the bad guys. So it's also their understanding the human minds to predict what's next. And it's really, really, really interesting job and quite well paid. Correct? Yes, and in the future, we will need more engineers to design, I name it security by design, to make the cyber systems immune, especially in critical infrastructure, like power plants, power grid, urban facilities, transportation, healthcare. So we need to design the new world well, we remember the world without cyber, my generation. I hope that the next generation will say that, okay, I remember the world before cyber immunity. So we need more engineers. That's why I hope that our trainings, our lessons, the books which we have will attract some of the most clever kids to the cybersecurity. We need you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Eugene, sharing us your thoughts on cyber immunity. So we have to also bid goodbye to Midori before we start. Bye. Thank you. Okay, so let's start our expert discussion with our speaker. Okay, it's like, okay. So our next speaker is the Chief Executive Officer of Center for Cybersecurity, a Singapore-based cybersecurity training organization building a new generation of information security practitioners. His deep and diverse experiences as a psychiatrist in training, life coach, and in professional L&D gives him unique insights into the human factor in cybersecurity. And I'm actually really proud to introduce him because the first time that he approached me to work with him on cyber resilience, we were so excited that now finally, 3 months after, yeah, it's happening. Please welcome Mr. Ethan Seow.
Hi, everyone. Testing. Okay, great. I think before I start, I will do a quick introduction about myself. I think within this panel of speakers, I'm the only millennial, I believe. So I remember the era of going from without internet to with internet. And that transition was a huge shock for a lot of us, especially in that generation. And I think that's why it's important for us to also talk about, cyber resilience and all those different topics. And that's why actually when I was luckily at the Kaspersky event, I was actually reaching out to Trisha and go like, oh, they talked about cyber resilience in children. And I was like, that's exactly where we want to go to. And that's when we started the conversation. And again, 3 months is actually a little bit short. It was a little bit surprising. But we're very excited that we actually managed to get here. There's a little bit of technical difficulty, so I'll just keep talking. All right, so I think one of the two main things I'm going to talk about is about digital citizenship and critical literacies. And these are two very important topics to me, especially because grade is coming up, hopefully. One of the major parts about this is a lot of things that we used to believe that we knew about life and about taking care of ourselves have drastically changed since cybersecurity, since the internet. One of the major reasons why cybersecurity appeals to me, and I'll be honest, I'm very new to cybersecurity. I only joined the industry about 2 years ago. It really appealed to me because it really touched upon a very key part of what it means to be, a relevant person in this world. Because we all know that there are people who are getting scammed, who are getting hurt every day on the cyber landscape. And trying to prevent this and trying to stop this is exactly what we are trying to do. And that's why talking about digital citizenship is also a major part of this equation. So if I can have the next page. Thank you. Right, so all of us are digital citizens of the 21st century. I believe nobody here has no phone, right? Like everybody here has his phone. Okay, so everybody is a digital citizen, right? So how many of you don't use your phone at all, don't use your phone at all throughout one working day? Okay, so this is why it's really important, right? That's why we say, okay, how many of you remember the days where it felt a lot safer? I mean, you didn't worry about scam calls. You didn't worry about scam messages. You didn't have to worry about what you're clicking online, but it was a different day altogether when the digital world was very, very open and very, very nice for you. Anybody knows those days? Yeah. You all know those days, right? Nowadays, any call that comes to your phone, you're already expecting it's a scam call. Any messages you receive, LTA is going to find you. This is definitely in Singapore. I don't drive, so every time I receive it, I'm like, are you kidding me? Right? So a lot of this, one major part about this is that a lot of the tools that we were used to, like before internet, a lot of things about don't open the door to strangers, right, is no longer even relevant in this space anymore because they don't just go to your door. They go into your phones. They go into every part of your life. And that's exactly why this cyber resilience is so important, because it's no longer where we are physically limited from the potential dangers, but in fact, they're available to us. And this is also a quick question. How many of you have kids or have nieces or nephews or people that you know that are using YouTube by the time like 1 or 2 years old? Right, like my niece and nephew are already using YouTube and clicking on the phones all day long. I think they're digital citizens by now. So I think this is why it's really important that we address this as well. So that's why I'm not going to give the answers today, because that's where I'm going to hand it over to the rest of the guys. I'm just going to go into the 4 questions that will be for us to think about. First up, defining things is very important. A lot of people don't like to define things because they are afraid that once you anchor it in, like the word love or the word, cybersecurity. A lot of people might not understand the definitions of this, but it helps a lot to define it very well. And when I talk about digital citizenship, it is essential for us to recognize that digital citizenship is our responsible behaviors on the cyber landscape. And this is where we also talk about protecting ourselves as well as how we deal with other people. There might be a lot of irresponsible people out there, but for ourselves, how do we protect our loved ones? How do we protect the people around us? Again, why cyber resilience in children is so important is because very often a lot of young kids, I'm not sure if you guys know about Roblox and some of the stories around game factories that are made of children who are between 11 and 12 years old on the internet. So what happens is that they play Roblox, they get recruited by one of those experienced players, and they become creators of new small games on Roblox, and they're being paid money on the internet. And these kids can work till 2, 3 a.m. just to finish the game. Well, this is why cyber resilience in children is important, because a lot of these things we don't get to see, and a lot of parents don't even know that their children are experiencing this, and why it is very important that we explore this. So which is why we go back to this, where we need to unlearn a bunch of social norms. A lot of times where we need to where we feel that as long as we cover our kids from the real world, they'll be perfectly fine, is no longer relevant. As long as they have a phone or access to a TV or access to even a laptop or a computer. And as we know from COVID, home-based learning became a norm. And therefore, a lot of kids have now access to a lot more digital devices than more than before, which is why actually unlearning a lot of the processes where we think that just keeping them safe physically is enough. We need to recognize what they're doing online, how they're doing it, which is why actually teaching educators and parents will be an essential part of increasing cyber resilience in children in the long run. And then let's go into this topic of critical literacies. I think when Singapore was a little bit more not so digital, where we're now a smart nation, everything's going online, we didn't have to think so much about what we're reading, what we're doing to the extent that we could, because we have access to the library. We have places where we can trust to get relevant information for all of us. We also are not being targeted by people across the world to try to get us to do things that we are not supposed to do, right? This is why critical literacies are increasingly important, especially in children and youth, because they're the most susceptible. And if we do not equip them with the skills, they become more and more under the fire. So let's go into the 5 basic things that we would like to talk about. Number 1 is to learn how to question. We are in Asia. This word is very scary. How many of you here remember days where your teachers would ask you to stop asking questions in class? Right, I definitely remember. So one of the major things that, sadly, why teaching educators is a very critical part of this is because we need to get the teachers to allow the students to question, because that's the first step as a critical literacy. Without questions, there's no way to evaluate. So this is where you go to the next phase, right? Where is this source trustworthy? Is my teacher telling me something I shouldn't believe in, right? There are times where we as students would need the space to really critically assess what we're receiving. And this is actually super important. And it's a critical literacy that a child especially needs today, because they're exposed to so much information online. Again, I'm watching my niece watch really, really weird videos in different languages, and I don't even know what she's watching. And I'm sitting over there going, how do I evaluate this problem, right? She's watching a bunch of videos I've never seen before in my life, and I don't even know what she's listening to. As for me, an uncle, not a parent, I am even questioning how much exposure we should give her. How do we evaluate this? How do we even train her to look at this objectively? Of course, the next part goes to analyze, right? To evaluate something, you need to know how to analyze. How do you cross-compare information? I think, again, our education system has been very active in telling us where to learn, how to learn, what to do. And I think in the new 21st century, unlearning that or following a path and actually re-questioning everything and analyzing it and cross-comparing it with all the other sources will be an essential part of cybersecurity as well as cyber resilience in children. Then we talk about synthesis. So this is another part which I love a lot, and it's actually, so in case you guys don't know, I'm also working as a jazz musician on the side. So one of the things I enjoy the most is the ability to stretch out and always test things. So synthesize is almost like that. Anybody who has done work in the lab knows that you need a hypothesis. And that process is absolutely important for a child to experience. Why is this the case? It's because without testing your hypothesis, you never know for sure what you're really touching. And actually, we're going back to training people in cybersecurity. Without a hypothesis, a lot of cybersecurity people cannot test and confirm what they're trying to do, right? Actually, one thing in CFC we do a lot of is getting our students to just try, because a lot of our training requires them to just do. And then a lot of people like to write on a piece of paper, think about it. So in case you guys don't know what bash script is or programming languages, people like to write on the paper and try to figure out whether this will work on the paper, right? So instead, it's so important for them to touch and feel and test. And that's why synthesize is so important. And last but not least, reflect. That's where after doing things, reflecting becomes effective, right? This is why these are critical core skills. You can go to the next one. So I kind of came up with, so my background is I go into culture and helping companies and helping people learn faster and better. One of the things that I realized was really much lacking, and why I came up with this thing called RENT, is because a lot of people don't have the space to speak. The space to speak and a voice. Actually, that's what the internet was created for. You know, a place where people could be an equal citizen, speak their voice, and figure out what they really wanted from the process. And that's why RENT was actually my best way of describing it. First up, you need to have your voice. You need to figure out what you already have, right? Then you can reflect and analyze, which I've talked about a little bit more. Then it's quite similar to the previous one. But most importantly is new perspectives. Where are you getting the new perspectives from? Are you getting new perspectives? Are you in your own echo chamber? I'm pretty sure a lot of people talk about, you know, how LinkedIn is an echo chamber, or some, you know, social media tends to be echo chambers of their beliefs. It is very important where we also teach our children what are the new perspectives that they can gain. And then last but not least, I always like this word called test and test and test and test. And I know this very well because I had to do this the hard way. I had to leave school before I figured out how to test because I was a very good boy all the way through. I followed the system very well. I went through medical school. And then only when I quit medical school was I forced to really face what testing really means and testing yourself. Testing what it means. I got scammed a couple of times. I worked with conmen. I've done a lot of things. We're talking about cyber resilience. Nothing teaches you more than getting scammed yourself, right? I think this is not what I'm telling everybody to do. But, you know, inevitably, sometimes it happens to you. And that's when you want to learn from this. If you're not going out there and getting into the world, you're not going to be able to test. And that's really why that's why I talk about critical literacies. Right, so one of my favorite authors, Paulo Freire, if you guys know him, he talks about to begin always anew, to make, to reconstruct, and to not spoil. And this is really about the fact that we need to unlearn and relearn and relearn and relearn every single round. And to refuse to bureaucratize the mind, which means no hard rules, everything is learned from experience. We are just gonna test and try and keep experimenting. And to understand that life is a process, I'm pretty sure as we are growing older, all of us are always learning new things. And that's why as a digital citizen, it's increasingly even more important that we focus on the critical literacies. And that's exactly what is going to be the next topic, I believe. Right, so I'm going to hand this over back to Tricia. And thank you everybody for listening.
Thank you, Ethan. Okay. You know, it's just reminded me that we humans are hardwired for convenience. We do shortcuts, right? So we need to get retrained to ask questions, evaluate, reflect, or test even our assumptions, right? And just right, because our next speaker will talk about practical tips on cybersecurity. And like to invite Noushin Shabab, who is a senior security researcher in the Global Research and Analysis Team, or GREAT, at Kaspersky. Her research focuses on the investigation of advanced cyber criminal activities and targeted attacks with a particular focus on local threats in the Asia-Pacific region. Noushin, she flew all the way from Melbourne, Australia last night, joining us this afternoon. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. Can you hear me? Okay. Okay. It's great to be here. Yeah, I arrived yesterday, going back tomorrow, but I still enjoy Singapore every time. Let's talk about cyber threats and how to deal with them at home and at school. First of all, before getting into the main topic, which is the cyber resilience, let's talk about some of the top cyber threats that were being forecasted for 2023. Number one, fraud in games and streaming services. And you will see how a lot of them are actually relevant for kids and for children as well. From the first one, we predicted that in 2023, we will see more and more online fraud in games and streaming services. And obviously, as more streaming services are coming into market, there are more, they become more competitive, and also games as well. Cyber criminals just find new ways to attack people and put their privacy and their online safety at risk. Number two, privacy risk in social media and metaverse. Of course, this is not, I mean, everyone knows that in social media, people put personal information, personal photos, they talk about their personal life. And if someone is trying to take advantage of this personal information, it puts the people's privacy on risk. Number three, cyber crimes on learning platforms. Since COVID forced people to stay at home and children to get into online services for education, these online learning platforms became more popular, and they proved to be quite effective. So still, they're still quite popular, and there are still new platforms coming up every day. And these just also bring more avenues for cyber criminals to try to use social engineering or other techniques, use Trojanized applications for learning platforms to attack kids through them. Number four, small devices as hacking target. As you know, as it was talked about by previous speakers, kids these days use smartphones, tablets, laptops all the time. And of course, any of these devices can be a target by any means from cyber criminals to compromise that system and put privacy and also personal information of kids and families at risk. Last but not least, phishing and social engineering. This has been going on for a long time, but still the most common and most effective way that cyber criminals use to compromise digital devices. Now let's talk a little bit about cyber threats that children face these days. These are from different surveys and statistics that were provided for this year. As you see here, an alarming statistics, 72% of children globally have been victims of cyber threats. And you see here that there are different categories that shows what is more likely, what harmful content is more likely to be targeting children. With misinformation be the biggest one, and then violent content, cyberbullying, cyber predators, and self-harm content. I will talk in more detail about some of them in the next slides. Also, let's look at some of the statistics and that we collected from the detections that we had on our different platforms, looking at the harmful content that was detected from Android applications for the past 6 months. You can see that the kids and also all the users are more likely to be targeted with harmful content on WhatsApp. Next one is YouTube, then TikTok. Then we detected harmful content and malicious content on Chrome browser, and last one, Instagram. Now let's talk about some more practical tips and talk about some cyber threats in a little bit more detail. Let's talk about online privacy first. I'm sure most of you know what doxing is. It is the disclosure of online information, disclosure information, personal information online without the consent from the victim. This information that attackers might publish online for different purposes. They can contain health-related information, finance-related information, address, mobile phone, passport data, work information, personal photos and videos, and also private conversations, which can be quite scary. Which is important, makes it really important to talk about privacy on the internet, to how to keep your personal data private and not let unauthorized people access it. There are some ways that you can improve privacy of your data online. For example, on different social media platforms and different applications, you can check the privacy settings and make sure that you know what is shared with what sort of audience. Also, it's important to make sure that you just don't put your email and your personal information and phone number anywhere online. And also, everything that you are sharing online, any personal information, any sensitive information that you are sharing online, make sure to think about how it can be used against you before putting it online. Next topic, which is also more relevant for kids, let's talk about cyberbullying. What is cyberbullying? Cyberbullying is bullying and violence in the digital space. It can be done through harmful messages and aggressive comments on social media platforms, on gaming platforms. It can be intimidating and can be done through harassment on online platforms. And it can also be like insulting someone in group chat. Statistics show that 26% of children in Singapore faced with cyberbullying last year. And you can see here that they are more likely to be cyberbullied on YouTube than Snapchat, TikTok, and Facebook. But of course, any other social media and any other online platform can have the same risk for children. But how do we know as parents, as teachers, as grown-ups, how do we realize that children have been cyberbullied? There are some signs that you can look for to understand if something harmful is happening on internet for the kids. First of all, they might be avoiding friends or social events. They might become more quiet and not enjoy things that they were enjoying before. They might find it hard to concentrate on their schoolwork, even drop in their school grades. Also skipping a school or expressing a desire to skip school. They might even look angry or horrified when they look at their phone, their tablets, or their computers. They might try to hide their phone or their screen to not allow anyone to see what they are experiencing. In the worst scenarios, they can maybe like avoid using their phone or expressing dark thoughts or even talking about suicide, which is very terrifying. But how we can cope with cyberbullying, how to help kids if they have experienced these situations, how do we do it? First of all, it's important to make sure that we do not respond to insult on internet and restrict access to that profile, that online account, especially for the people who is doing the bullying. If it's possible, complain to the technical support or authorities of that platform. If it gets escalated and it gets worse, collect evidence, contact police, and of course, because cyberbullying can have very harmful effects on kids, make sure to talk to psychologists and get help from psychologists. And of course, to help kids, you can make sure that they know you are always ready to talk to you about what they are experiencing online. Share information about cyber threats with them, talk about cyberbullying and encourage them to talk about it if they see something, and encourage whistleblowing, not bystanding. And also show them how to cope with cyberbullying, because even if you try so hard to prevent it, it might happen at some point, and it's important to make sure that they know how to cope with it. Another category of cyber threats and online safety issues that I'm going to talk about is online fraud and social engineering. What is online fraud? Online fraud is the action of attackers aiming at obtaining data or money from internet users. Social engineering is mostly helping attackers to do online fraud. What is social engineering? It's a psychological manipulation in which the attacker tricks the victim to hand over some confidential and personal data. They can use different techniques like scare tactics to say something like, if you don't share this information by a few days, this account will be blocked. Or false promises, like saying, if you want to protect your data from being hacked, just do these steps. Or even false information, like saying, if you install these updates on your system, you can get access to something else. Phishing is also a type of cyber attack that is closely connected with social engineering. Phishing is a type of a scam that attackers use to get access to sensitive data. And mostly the purpose of phishing is to get access to identifying information, also passwords and credit card numbers and bank accounts and this sort of information. There are different types of phishing. You have email phishing, which is done through emails. I'm sure everyone has seen examples of phishing emails. There are voice phishing that is very common these days, text message phishing, also website spoofing, which usually happens when the attackers create a website that looks like something legitimate from authorities or from a well-known brand, and try to trick people to put their bank details or put their personal information on that platforms. But how to protect yourself from online fraud? First of all, make sure that you use complex passwords and don't reuse passwords. Use different passwords for different accounts. Password managers can help in this case. Also make sure when buying online, only put orders through official shops websites. Be careful when buying services that ask for bank card details. Make sure that it is something legitimate that, that you are buying. And obviously never correspond with sellers on third-party websites, which can be a cyber attacker talking to you. Also, don't trust emails that promise incredible discount or even like scaring you to lose money. Don't click on links, every link that's in the email, messengers and social networks, especially if it looks suspicious. Don't click on advertising banners on suspicious websites. Check the web page address to make sure that you have not been redirected to another website before putting bank details and password information. And also, if you receive a call from a bank or from another known organization, make sure that you end the call and try to initiate the call yourself through finding the phone number from their official website, or if it's a bank account, looking at the bank card that you have. And it's important to educate kids as well, and talk about these tips that I have shared in the previous slides with the kids. Share examples of social engineering and phishing, because for kids it's not easy to it's not as easy as it is for adults to find suspicious emails, because obviously kids have limited life experience, and it's not easy for them to understand if this is legitimate or is it suspicious. And obviously encourage critical thinking and getting kids to understand what threats they are going to face when they go online, and share the tips about online fraud. At the end, let's talk about how to support kids to become more cyber resilient. Cyber resilience is the ability to prevent, withstand, and recover from cybersecurity incidents. First of all, first step, be attentive. If it comes to cyberbullying, try to watch for signs of cyberbullying, set some rules, strictly prohibit cyberbullying, because it's important to talk about cyberbullying with kids and make sure to let them know what can be harmful to other kids, what comments can be harmful to other kids as well, and encourage whistleblowing. Also, about other types of cyber threats, make sure that you stay up to date about different attack techniques that attackers use every day. Pay attention to different online platforms that kids use, and how they are using it, and what are the threats that they are exposed to. Number two, create a safe environment, be reassuring, listen attentively, and make sure that you answer their questions. Encourage them to ask about cybersecurity, to share what they have seen online, and obviously report any unsuitable behavior or content on the website to the authorities, if it's a government website, or to the technical support of that service. Describe the threats, talk about data privacy, talk about cyberbullying, talk about online fraud and different examples of social engineering and phishing and everything that we talked about. And at the end, teach cyber resilience, talk about prevention, talk about how to withstand cyber threats, and obviously how to recover from cyber threats. We'll be happy to answer your questions if you have time now, or at the Q&A session, and we have also some material for you. Thank you.
Before I introduce our next speaker, I'm just happy to share with you that we are distributing our Midori Kuma in a very special race, children's book. Lucky that you're here with us. Okay. Thank you. Again, thank you, Noushin. I think just to reiterate, we adults have, well, it is our responsibility as adults to be present. I guess very often we're also busy with our own mobile devices that we're not seeing the signs that kids are being bullied or being threatened online. So we have to be there and make sure that if they experience such threats online, they can turn to us as responsible adults. Okay, our next speaker will, so after we've discussed practical tips, right? Now our next speaker will discuss the motivation theory behind how kids interact on social media. Dr Jiow Hee Jhee has lectured and trained over 40,000 people on new media topics. He researches the impact of the media on the family, cyber wellness, and cybercrime. Dr. Hee Jhee currently serves as a member of the Media Literacy Council and Films Consultative Panel. He is an associate director at the Singapore Institute of Technology. Dr. Jiow Hee Jhee, thank you for joining us this afternoon.
Thank you.
Give a round of applause.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here, and I want to thank the organizers for inviting me over. I'm going to talk to you about, so when I was approached to do this, I thought, hey, is there something valuable I can bring to the table? So I thought of revisiting a particular research that I did that uses this theory called protection motivation theory. Let me just introduce a little bit about what I do. I'm an associate professor at Singapore Institute of Technology. I'm actually the program leader. That means I look after this degree program called Digital Communications and Integrated Media. And my research interest lies in media literacy as well as parental mediation. So most of the time, I go and give talks to parents in schools and things like that on how to manage their children's media habits. Specifically for my PhD thesis, I studied how parents in Singapore manage their children's video gaming habits. Okay, but prior to becoming an academic, I actually spent 10 years doing cyber wellness type of education, so covering this aspect as well. So every time when I go to schools, I speak to kids and things like that, and then we teach them all these things that you must do. If you set passwords, you must make it a bit difficult, the kind, don't 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, that kind of thing. Then the students will, oh yeah, then still go back, don't practice. Why? So so we embarked on this particular project that uses this theory called protection motivation theory. Now, there are a lot of references there, but basically it's all from one project. We were able to submit to a few conference as well as journal publication. And me and my co-authors actually wrote an opinion piece on the Straits Times motivating youth to set good passwords. So, so this is what we did. Now, if you were to actually go and read all this, you realize that, how come certain things are different from others? That's because out of the big project, we were able to chunk certain parts out. But I'm just going to share with you overall what this particular project was about. Let me go on to what protection motivation theory is. Okay, now it's originally developed to decipher factors that motivate individuals in managing the risk of an illness. This theory explains whether a person will be more motivated to demonstrate protective behavior stemming from his or her preconceived notion of a threat and how he or she could respond to the risky situation. So I kind of color tagged it red and green because there are 5 elements to this protection motivation theory. Now, the first one is perceived vulnerability. I'm going to put in the context of setting passwords for, let's say, a youth or children's social media account. Okay, so the first thing is perceived vulnerability. Will I be a victim? Okay, so the idea is that the child will think, hey, will I likely be a victim of being hacked on my social media? Okay, So these are the kind of questions that we look into when we talk about perceived vulnerability. Then we have perceived severity. Okay, if I get hacked, is it very serious? Is my social media account just showing, only have one picture of a flower? If there's only one picture of a flower, then not very serious, right? The consequences of being hacked. But if my social media account somehow got my address, got my bank account number, which you shouldn't put up there anyway, but if got all this information, then the perceived severity, if I get hacked, it is very, very severe, the consequences, okay? So these two kind of cover the notion of the threat. So how does the child actually perceive the threat? Will I get hacked? And if I get hacked, will it be very severe? Or how severe will it be? Then we look at the response to the risky situation. How effective is that protective behavior? What do you want me to do? Okay, you want me to set, say, 32 character passwords and must have uppercase, lowercase, all the interesting symbols and all that. What is my perception that if I were to engage in that behavior, how effective is it in protecting me? Okay, so this is the perceived effectiveness. And then perceived self-efficacy. Can I successfully engage in that behavior? Wow, 32 character is very effective, but I cannot engage in it. I cannot remember 32 characters. I can't imagine every time I go inside my social media account, I have to key in 32 characters just to get in, okay? So how can I successfully engage in that protective behavior? Now, what are the negative consequences associated with engaging in that protective behavior? This is a little bit related to the earlier one, because earlier ones, in some other academic journals, it may be referred to response costs and things like that. But the key idea is, what are the negative consequences associated with engaging in the protective behavior? Are there certain negative consequences? Okay. Now, basically what it says, what this theory says is this: if 1, 2, 3, and 4, you score very high, okay, and the last one you score very low, you are more motivated to protect yourself. Okay? So for example, will I be a victim? Yeah, sure will be a victim. Okay, that's high. How severe the consequences? Wow, very severe. Okay, so that's high. Okay? How effective is this protective? Wow, it's very effective. Okay? Can I successfully engage in it? Yes, I can. I can do it very well. If all these are very high, there's a higher motivation to protect yourself. What are the negative consequences? Very little negative consequences. So you add all these factors up. The first 4, if it's high, and the last one is low, there is a very high chance you are more motivated to protect yourself. Now, so let me tell you the context of this study. So we wanted to test the use. So we worked with about 255 students across 13 secondary schools. What we did was we adopted experimental design, okay? What we did was, before the students embarked on, before the students start on their journey, they are supposed to set a password to enter this journaling site. So this journaling site means I journal what I learned today, etc., and things like that. So they enter a password. Then different groups of people, because it's experimental design, some groups don't actually go through any password training. Some, they just go through other training. Some groups actually go through password training, etc., and things like that. Now, there are many different permutations that we adopted for this, but I'm just going to share with you briefly and generally what it looks like. So the student will set a password, and then during every day in the class, okay, I think they run it about twice a week. They will journal their thoughts and things like that in that site. So they have to log in and journal their thoughts, right? Then at the end of, I think, 2 or 3 weeks, we ask them to reset their password, okay? So that was our experimental design. You know, sometimes you have this automated email that says, you know, you're supposed to reset your password. So they went in to reset their password, and we actually measure the password strength. I have a co-author who's she's more of a ICT kind of infocom tech kind. She does programming, so she knows how to use certain programs to test the password strength. we tested on two factors: time taken to hack and how many tries taken to hack the password. Okay, I don't know how to explain the technical part, but just trust me, it's like that one now. Okay, so we actually found improvements in some of the intervention programs that we've done, but I'm not going to talk about that. Through that particular study, there are a few things we found. Okay, one, our study noted that while used generally had favorable coping appraisal, they had less favorable threat appraisal. Okay, so they do not perceive themselves as vulnerable to being hacked, and they do not think the consequences of being hacked are very severe. So this was out of the 5 components, right? So we wanted to find out, if we want to educate kids, where should we target? Where do you think, where are they lacking? Okay, so we found that actually they are lacking in the perceived vulnerability. Oh, I know about hacking, but not me. I think my friend will get it, not me. Okay, so that's talking about perceived vulnerability. And then perceived severity. Oh, I got hacked. Okay, I think I only have 1 or 2 pictures. You know, one is a flower, one's a cat. Okay lah, heck lah. No, I don't care. You see, it's not very severe. Okay, so we found that actually these 2 things were lacking, and one of the things that we decided to do was to focus our education on those 2 areas. Okay, now, so this is an example of what we did, and one of the intervention was for perceived vulnerability. What we did for the kids in educating the kids was to show them global and local statistics of hacking cases among adolescents. We also give them case studies on how and why social media accounts were breached and highlight susceptibility to encountering some of these. So this is our way of educating the kids. We found that they were lacking in these 2 areas, and therefore we focus our education on these 2 areas. The second one, perceived severity. General consequences of having poor or lax password security practices. One thing we found when working with youth is that we wanted to bring case studies that were in Singapore, and you know, closer proximity to them, they will probably feel it a little bit more. And so that was what we did. And actually, in like part of that big project, we also found that we were successful in that. So in terms of, you know, we talk about cyber resilience, right? What do we want to do with the kids? How do we want to educate kids? These are things that you can think of also. While we thought of this in terms of like education in a classroom setting, we can even venture to think of this in other aspects. For example, when you reset the password, the time, you know, there's a prompt that comes out. Do you know you have 1 in 10 chances of being hacked, that kind of thing. So these are some things for us to consider. So in our study, what was beneficial was we actually were able to nail down to where, or at least in our sample, where was lacking in terms of the education and where we can focus our education on. Okay, so actually, yeah, that's it. I want to share with you the study that we did, and I hope that you can take back some questions with you, and feel free to ask it later. Thank you.
Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome again to the Head Foundation Dialogue in partnership with Kaspersky and the Center for Cybersecurity. It's truly an honor for me to moderate this panel discussion. And I must start with an apology. Jhee, as you were talking about the perceived vulnerability and the threats that you perceive in your account, you mentioned about Instagrams with just photos of flowers. And I took out my phone, showed it to my colleague, and both of us burst out laughing because that's all there is on my Instagram account. That and photos of my bicycle, so I don't feel too threatened. But ladies and gentlemen, I think it's been a really fascinating opportunity to hear from our panel speakers. And I would invite each of you, if you have questions, do raise your hand. We have a couple of microphones moving around the auditorium, but we also have a lot of attendees on Zoom. So those of you on Zoom, please ask your questions in the Q&A chat, and I will be more than happy to ask your questions to our panelists. But as the moderator, I get the privilege of asking the first question. And this is actually at all 3 of you. You know, everyone shared about the idea of building cyber resilience, about the idea that, you know, we are very focused, I think, with the work that the foundation does, but also all our partners. We're very concerned about the well-being of young people today. And we talk about how we need to build their resilience and be able to have them better cope with the challenges. But if we take the word cyber out of the equation and we just say building resilience, have we actually changed significantly, right? For today's young parents, many of us, I'm not a parent myself, but many of my peers who are, and like yourself, Ethan, I too am technically a millennial, so you're not the only one on this panel who's a millennial. I may look a lot older than I actually am. But I'm taking away the word cyber from it, right? We talk about dealing with bullying. When I was in school, bullying was a real problem, right? I won't say which side of it I was on, but bullying was a problem, and parents taught us how to deal with it, right? Parents told us, you got to report it to the authorities, right? The moderator, the teacher, the principal. You got to be able to manage your own emotions. You need to know how to deal with it. Criticism is going to be there. So examples like this, right? How do you moderate the usage of technology? I'm just wondering, has technology made us worse parents? Are we unable to do the kind of skills that are needed for parenting? Because we're so focused, how do we help our children navigate this space? But those skills that Ethan talked about, the ability to analyze, to question, these were skills that were inculcated by our parents when we were growing up, right? So if we continue to inculcate these skills, but we do it keeping in full mind the context that we live in, a very, very digital, very technologically heavy world, is parenting really evolving, or why are our kids struggling? I have a thought on especially cyberbullying, but I'll come to that later. But I'd like to hear perspectives. Has our parenting, because of our ability to utilize technology so much and find ourselves so embedded in technology, that we're not paying enough attention to that human touch of parenting that maybe a generation ago we did?
I think I can start first. I think this is a very compelling question. I don't think it is an issue of parenting within itself. I think every parent tries to do their best. I think that's a genuine thing that I would say. Everybody is trying to do their best in the space that they can. I think this is something I learned definitely from psychiatry. And not because of anything, but because you start seeing how care, right? Caregivers burn out. Parents, I'm pretty sure a lot of parents here would probably say it is tough to be a parent in this day and age because there's so many spaces that you need to care for your children about compared to before. You go back to the 90s, the way my parents were treating us was, as long as he survives, it's fine, in some sense. But I mean, my mom was a very great carer, but a lot of it was just feeding us, dealing with us, letting us play toys. Make sure you don't swallow the toy. But when you bring in phones, when you bring in computers, when you bring in TV, the whole set of things change. And I'll use cybersecurity as a perspective, right? Talk a lot to one of our good friends. Talk a lot about threat modeling. If you look at back in the 80s and 90s, what are the biggest threat to a child? Falling flat onto the sand, making mistakes, burning themselves, doing something wrong. Now you have to worry about who they're talking to, what they're talking to, what kind of people are they likely to talk to, where you put their photos, where the photos at, what are they watching? There are a lot more things to think about. So it's not even whether or not parents are getting better. It's where, because of the change, the skills that we were taught, even as younger people, that then translate to parents, right? Because once you're a parent, you're teaching your children what you learned from your parents. And that process requires us to also think about how are we sharing it with them. So the previous generation didn't have TV, didn't have, a lot of them had TV. A lot of them didn't have access to the internet, didn't have access to so much information. YouTube, right? Which is one of the biggest places where cyberbullying is happening, right? So these information was not available for them to framework and work around, which is also one of the reasons why we're doing this, right? We're making it more accessible and more possible to talk about these conversations in a way that allows people to recognize that, yes, there's greater threats, there's greater difficulty as a parent to manage and teach a child. And therefore, the critical literacies need to go even further, deeper. And because, again, right, as a child, I had limited access to certain types of media, certain types of things that is now easily accessible. And therefore, even more hunkering down on this will be a more important point than even limiting what they can see and limiting what they can do. Anyone else?
Okay, I'll go next. So ever since 2001, oh, that's very long. I've been
22 years ago.
Yeah, so I spent 10 years in the cyber wellness world. So one of the things that I do is I also speak to parents then while I was doing my PhD and then becoming an academic until now, I've also been giving talks to parents. Now, so this is what I've noticed. Initially, when you started at 2001, when kind of like people are getting the hang of the internet, that was where most of the parents struggle with technology. But nowadays, like the past few years, that I've been giving talks and all that, parents do understand the technology a little bit better. So it's just a different platform. So for example, parents are on Facebook, the kids are on Snapchat or IG or whatever. So it is just kind of like a different platform, but it's kind of easier for the parents to understand and navigate the world. Although there are still some who are who are not as tech savvy as their kids now. Okay, so I mean, I have heard of stories of how kids kind of trick their parents, and also it's deal with tech savviness now. So talking about passwords, right? I mean, this mother was coming. I do not know. Every time I set block, he always have a way around it. And then when I interview the child, I tell you a secret. I put camera behind, so when I see my mommy type in, I know which one. So anyway, the mom wasn't sharp enough to see whether there was camera behind. But what I'm saying is that there's still a little gap, but I think that the gap is narrowing a bit because nowadays the parents are a little bit more savvy, more tech savvy and all that. Yeah. So I also want to go back to what you shared about if you remove cyber and resilience into this. And I mean, Ethan shared about cyberbullying. Then I remembered this because actually I'm doing some work on cyberbullying now. Firstly, you mentioned about definition. So I was thinking, yes, what's the definition of cyberbullying? Now, let me tell you why, okay? Because I've interacted with some academics on what definition of cyberbullying. And it appears when I interact with the kids, two characteristics are missing, okay? Number one, it has to be, this particular academic says it has to be a repeated attack. Okay, so when I interview some youths, I say, oh, you were cyberbullied. Yeah, why? He called me fat. How many times? One time. Oh, so you were hurt and you feel cyberbullied after one time calling you fat. Okay, so that was one definition that I'm still trying to sort out. The other one is the other characteristics about cyberbullying, because all this in the academic literature, cyberbullying is taken from the definition of physical bullying. That was how it was adapted. The other aspect that's kind of missing, or maybe the youth don't understand, is a power difference. Okay, there must be a power. So let me give you an example. This particular youth, okay, actually went to bully the most popular guy in the school. Okay, that was a big mistake because he had friends who retaliate, and the cyber bullier has now become the victim. Okay, so I'm still trying to sort this out. So this is what I'm saying. I'm actually working on a project to define, to look at what cyberbullying is. But if you talk about resilience, right? So I'm just wondering, is calling you fat one time considered cyberbullying, or are our kids resilient these days enough to, okay lah, so what? You also fat, right? Okay, whoa, I shouldn't be promoting this, but you get what I mean. No, in my days when secondary school, call me fat, I was, okay, but I'll just go back. Yeah, okay, so I hope that answers.
It does. And in secondary school, you called me fat, you're about 20 years too early. I think about your point about students getting smarter than teachers and spoofing. I heard this really funny story where we had to go online. All classes were on Zoom, and I was talking to a friend who's a teacher and said, originally the kids started realizing they didn't want to be in class, right? So they put snapshots of themselves as their profile picture, and the teacher looking at 40 didn't realize. But very quickly, the teachers picked it up. Why on earth is this kid not blinking for like 20 minutes straight? The kids got smart. They started recording themselves on 5-second loops. And they put it up on Zoom as their background picture. And here you have the teacher basically teaching a guy who's just on a 5-second loop, right? There's no one behind it. But yeah, I think some of those perspectives are very helpful. And I think the point I'm trying to make, and I do not want to belabor it, is a lot of the threats that we're facing today in the cyber world are not new. They've just migrated to the cyberspace. I was just jotting down as we were hearing about phishing websites. How different is that from the last times when we used to walk even the streets of Singapore, and you had a guy trying to sell you a Rolex watch that clearly wasn't a Rolex watch and was a deal too good to be true, right? But ladies and gentlemen, let me not hog the questions, and let me open it up to the floor, to our audience. Do you have any questions from our audience before I move to some of the questions on our Zoom platform? Really? Yes, sir. So could you use the mic, please, so that those on Zoom can pick it up?
My name is Fred. I'm in a college as well, and I know Ethan. So I came here to know the pedagogy behind your school, and I kind of like surmise that you're using the principle of rant. Can you explain further? And in relationship to the topic of cyber resilience.
Oh, absolutely. I think when we talk about resilience, resilience requires a person to have the space to voice their thoughts. So it goes back to the concept of voice. And because I actually work with Coalition Against Bullying in Children and Youth, every time I mention it, it's a bit long of a name. We usually call it CAPSY. It's a charity I work with, and we have a student lead here, a 16-year-old. I think he's the youngest in the room. I think where we are, and talking about cyberbullying again, one of the major spaces about voice, about the ability to speak up, is a very important place for us to be resilient. I'm pretty sure if you don't have a space where you can voice your frustrations, your concerns, and your thoughts as a person, you will actually kind of just bottle it all up and you get overwhelmed, which is actually another definition from bullying. So one of the major concepts around bullying, one of the definitions was also being the bullied becomes overwhelmed with emotions. So the rent space is a very important part of this, where the ability to have a voice, where you're given the space and the safe space to be able to speak up your voice. And I think cyber resilience, and we go back to that as a topic as well, is really going back to the fact that, which is why it's still the first step, which is if you don't voice, you won't know what is happening in your world and your life. And when we go back to cyber resilience, again, if a child does not report to parents about cyberbullying, would they get help? If a child or a student was to not report to teachers, would he or she get help that is relevant for them? Or even a friend to be able to figure out what to do. Very often, if we're taught to just hold it in, it will just explode. No matter how much ability we have to rationalize it or intellectually dissect it, we cannot find the right support to get us out of it. And I think that's why it's a very much part of what I talk about.
Spoken about the psychological aspect of your system or probably your pedagogy in your school. What about, because I know that you're teaching cybersecurity itself, which is a very technical field, so how do you merge these two? How much of the psychological aspect is into your pedagogy and how much is it in the technical aspect of cybersecurity? Wonderful question. I think we had an internal conversation. Every education, adult education as well, is basically early childhood education. You have to teach everybody to unlearn everything. So you have to teach them what is going on, especially when you deal with kids. The amount of showing you need to show them, expose them to new ideas, expose them to new things. I mean, I think before, talking about cyber resilience and being on the internet, we could not see that as cyberbullying in early days when we first went on Facebook, because there was no definition for it. There was no way of identifying it as an issue. So it's the same way where exposure, recognizing the impact of that, having research that actually tells you exactly what happens to a child after being cyberbullied. Or in cybersecurity, in training, we do a lot of show and tell, right? Which is exactly how you get hacked. It gives you the ability to truly understand and appreciate what is happening and what's going on so that you can learn to be resilient. And I think this, again, goes back to, are you exposing yourself to the right things? Are you having the right exposure? Are you getting the right knowledge? And that's why we always say adult education is as much as childhood education is, right? It takes the same amount of work, as much as we believe that it should be easier.
Noushin, do you have a perspective on this, particularly with your research on cyberbullying and how it works?
Yes, not to share.
Well, we'll give you some time to think about that, as we also do have a question coming in online. And I think these two questions have got some similarity to it, and I'll open it to all three panelists. the question really comes from, okay, how do you get, so there are two questions here, right? How do you get teachers and parents to become more responsible to use the internet? But keeping in mind that one of our questions being asked by someone in India, right? And with the work that we do, and many of us in this room are familiar with what's happening around us in less developed contexts, right? So couple that with this question that in many systems, right, where opportunities for development are a lot more limited, there's a general sense of fear among parents, teachers, adults in general, to get young people on the internet. So what's the best thing you do? Build a wall, right? Stop them from entering, don't get them exposed. That lacks the practical experience. And when they eventually end up there, which they're going to have to, they want to be globally competitive, they've got no practical experience. So how do we do that? How do we get, right? Because parents and teachers are going to be the key responsible adult to help a child navigate this very complex global space. But yet in many developing country contexts, many parents struggle to navigate these spaces on their own, and out of just inherent fear, they put up a wall and a barrier. So what sort of conversations would you have with such parents and teachers trying to convince them not to do that and build up their own skill sets?
Oh, okay. I'll start. Yeah. No, thanks for, the reason is because I appreciated Ethan for bringing up the word digital citizenship, because I think, again, after 2001, when we started at that point in time, it was always this fear connotation, be careful, internet, whatever, and things like that. I think we are slowly moving into a space where we actually see it as like a digital citizenship. I know you're thinking of trying how to define it, right? But the way I look at it is not just the fear, but also the positive aspects. So if you talk about education, how can we break this so-called social norm, for lack of a better word, is to show them the positive applications of it. And, we are just hoping that when the child gets into it, he or she will just walk straight into the positive application rather than, tentatively exploring around and having this fear and stuff like that. So if you were to ask me, I think what we need to do is also to highlight or profile some of these positive users, good users of the internet, and how they can be an active citizen of the digital landscape.
Sure. What I wanted to share, I think it perfectly makes sense that not all the parents, especially maybe teachers, are familiar with all the platforms, online platforms and online services that kids use these days. And obviously you don't expect all the parents, mostly, as you said, in more developing countries to be familiar with all these platforms. And obviously they would be scared because they don't know what is out there that their kids are getting themselves exposed to. That's why I think it's very important to have proper education for teachers and for parents as well, to get them aware and give them knowledge about what's out there and what are the threats that kids are facing. Even though kids might be more familiar with that platforms, they know much better how to use digital devices compared to parents sometimes. But there are still kids, they don't have that much life experience. When it comes to cyber threats, when it comes to bullying or fraud online, when it comes to social engineering, even kids that are really tech savvy and they think that they know a lot, even they know a lot about cyber threats, they are more susceptible to fall victim and be threatened by what might be harmful on different platforms. So I guess it's important to have education for teachers and of course for parents as well.
Yeah, I think this is the topic that this is actually the reason why me and Tricia were talking so much about this and why we even organized this. Was really the goal as educators. We're not even just aiming at students. We can teach cyber awareness to children, but like he said, Hee was very accurately saying, once they go home, all gone, right? So I think one of the major parts about this is children follow their parents and their educators and their teachers. And I think this is why modeling the way is really the key part. And like you shared, right? Like no matter how savvy they are, they will still be susceptible because like you talked about resilience, right? Once you remove the cyber, it's just resilience. That major part of it is still being an adult. It allows you to be more of an adult-ish. But one of the major parts about this is children will still be susceptible if they're not given the experience, and because they have the lacking of experience, they have no ability to manage it, even if they know the platforms well. This is where, which is why critical literacies, I don't want to bring it back to only my topic, but critical literacies that shown and showcase to the student, the kids. If the parent goes, oh, I met this friend, he's trying to sell me something I don't want to buy, this is how I dealt with it. Would you like to come and see how I deal with it? Something like this could be something relevant where a kid can learn a bit more about how a parent thinks about it. Very often there's a separation between the work life or social life for the parent and the child. And that actually, this allows the child to see how a parent actually shows resilience in managing different types of situations. And I think this is where having conversations around this would be helpful.
I just want to throw a thought out there, and maybe we don't have to respond to it right now. I think we have much more questions. But one of the biggest challenges, I think, that differentiates cyberbullying from actual bullying that many of us grew up with is that cyberbullying allows anonymity. Yes. You don't have to know who's bullying you. But if you're being bullied in school, chances are, when we go growing up at least, somebody was either kicking you, bullying you, hurling insults at you. You knew who they were. Right? That makes a big difference. And I think this point that Ethan just brought up, right, about parents sort of decoupling between the family, raising the family, their social life, and their professional lives. That wasn't so much the case last time, particularly between the social and the family, right? Because you had your friends, and your friends were people, real people that you meet, you have meals with, your kids play with each other's kids. But today, many parents, like many young people, have their own network of online friends, right? Their own online network, their own WhatsApp group that maybe even their spouse is not aware of, right? This is who your circle of friends are, right? And the mutual overlap. So what you navigate in that online space, the online space is also designed in a large part for us to be anonymous, to us to be individuals who can interact with the communities, different communities based on differing interests, or even different personas that we want to showcase at any given point. So that's just something that sort of popped into my head, and I was that habit of saying anything that pops in my head.
I think we enjoy it, right, everybody?
I think we have a question from the young gentleman over there.
Yeah, thank you for the time. I'm Rio. I'm originally from Indonesia, based in Jakarta. Happy to be here to support our partner Center for Cybersecurity. Thank you for inviting us. I think, first of all, like, it's very interesting. Like, currently, I also serve in the organization where we mandated by Jokowi, our president, to regulate AI industry in Indonesia. And one of our organization focus is we work together with UNESCO to teach for educator about the AI ethics. And one of the ethics that we talk is about the ethics about how we ensure that the children or like young generation, adolescent and whatever, understand the safety part of the AI and I think in that sense is similar to cybersecurity. One of the issue that we found in Indonesia, especially like in terms of the awareness of the general population, even though if we see that the number of hack, the number of cyber attacks in Indonesia is, I think, if I'm not mistaken, is the highest in the Asia Pacific. But a lot of people, especially in the rural area where I live in, we just like, oh yeah, that's happened to this company, but not in, I don't have any bank account in that bank, so I'm safe, right? So maybe my question is just like, because a lot of you are here, like the panel is like expert in education, like how to ensure, like, because one of our mandate from the president as well, again, like the focus is also about the education and how do we educate, like not just about the educator, but also like general population in general to be more aware about this kind of thing. Like, so yeah, maybe you can share your experience, especially I think those perceived vulnerability, if I'm not mistaken, the term, like we are okay, we are safe, like something like that, because it's not really relatable to us. But yeah, that would be my question. Thank you.
So I'll start. So that particular study adopted protection motivation theory. Okay, so you know I'm a researcher, right? So I'm an academic. So if you ask me to start anything, the first thing is I do research one, find out what the problem is. So if you ask me, that is something that I will do if you want to adopt that particular theory. Now I want to flow on from what Ethan shared also. He said one of the best ways you learn not to get scammed is to get scammed, right? So there's another theory called inoculation theory. I actually wanted to do that. I was actually in negotiations with the police force to actually run that kind of study, but it didn't take off. But there is another theory called inoculation theory. That means you get scammed, so inoculation, right? You inject a little bit of that, kind of like that virus, and you're supposed to build up immunities and things like that. It's the same principle. So you try and scam, and I'm not sure if you're aware, there are certain, there were practices of this in Singapore, okay? Where there's a vending machine somewhere in the sports hub where you can buy a power bank for $1, okay? Power bank for $1. You can search Straits Times. It actually was done. So they put in $1 and came out a message for them to actually go to the nearest police post to get educated and then that kind of thing. So I wanted to try that. So anyway, if you ask me, as a researcher, I do research first. Then I find out where the problem is and what works. Yeah. Okay, so that's from me.
Remember to get vaccinated, everyone. Noushin, maybe your perspectives, with this, as adults, right? How do we navigate, like in the Indonesian context, you have so many cyber threats. How do you navigate this better?
I guess it all goes back to continuing doing the education. Obviously, I agree that once it happens to someone, they will be cautious after that. But still, I mean, there are different. We talked about different types of phishing, and I guess the ones that are older and people have heard more about them, they are, even if they have not been compromised or they have not been a victim themselves, they are more cautious about them, like email phishing. And obviously, if they hear again and again and they get educated again and again, it will make a difference. I mean, obviously you can't scam everyone.
In cybersecurity, there's a term called pen test.
Yeah, but still, you can't do pen testing on every single user. You have to have a consent from someone to do it. But anyway, I guess, I mean, there's not much. I mean, you can't force people to be cautious. You can just teach them and teach them and teach them, and they will think about it, and at some point they will start taking it more seriously.
If I can just add in just one last point. I fully agree with both of them. I mean, one of the biggest things about change is when people experience it for themselves. There are a number of times where people say it won't happen to me, and then if subsequently it happens. I'm pretty sure you all have experienced that before. No? Yes, no? Okay, cool. Everybody went yes. Okay, good. So one of the biggest things about perceived vulnerability is you have to experience it. And we go back to this. Are we capturing the people post-vulnerability, post-breach, or whatever term we want to use in cybersecurity? Usually companies only spend on cybersecurity after they get breached, right? We all know that. Oops, not all. But it's a very common saying, right? So I think where this is, are we having a large enough capture net to really capture the people after things happen? Because we can't move a mountain if it doesn't want to be moved. And so the only way for me is to capture people as and when they find, oh, I actually would have suffered from this. Share the story with everybody else and then capture all those people at the same time because it's close to them. It's anecdotal. It's related to them. And that's what I would just have to add.
Thank you, Ethan. So I think we had a question behind. So in the interest of time, maybe we'll ask both back to back and then we'll let our panelists answer. So sir, go ahead first and then pass the mic down. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. So I wanted to ask, from the discussion thus far, it sounds like it is inevitable for children to stumble and fall while they navigate the digital landscape. So I just wanted to ask, like, for the three panelists, what would be your advice to caregivers in how they should respond once they stumble and fall?
Hi. From the discussion so far, right, we've talked about removing cyber from the word cyber resilience, talking about resilience as itself, and then we talked about educating the people, right, and then we're also talking about we need to educate the educators, right. Now, as the saying goes, it takes a village to raise a kid, right? It takes a village to raise a kid, and then if that's the case, if all adult education is childhood education, wouldn't this mean that it takes a village, a community, right, to start to educate one another, to form groups, right, to be able to help one another through this whole process of becoming a digital citizen? Now, what are your views about building communities and having communities in each of these local areas, be it Singapore, be it Indonesia, right, to spread this word, spread this message, to educate one another through this process of becoming more resilient, right, in this whole cyber world?
Thank you very much, gentlemen. Maybe we'll start with the first question, right? It seems inevitable that our young people are going to trip up and fall. How do we as adults, either parents, educators, uncles, myself included, respond to that? How do we help our children? I think this comes back to the point, resilience, cyber resilience, how do we build it in our children?
I'll go quickly to psychiatry. It's the best place to talk about this as well. If you notice how a lot of American and European psychiatry has gone, medication is used as a stopgap to be able to then treat them psychologically. And when we go into psychological processes, one of the major parts about this is about acceptance. Acceptance of failure, acceptance of mistakes. And I think one thing I do like a lot about Western culture is while the kid falls, you don't scold them, don't cover them, don't do whatever. Just, how do you feel? Are you okay? And then if the kid goes, it really hurts, it's like, okay, that's really bad. What happened there? And you actually go through that process with them regularly. And this allows them to analyze why they fell, because they ran on a slippery floor, why they made this mistake, what's the consequences of that. It's capturing those moments to get it as a learning experience above. I'm pretty sure, I don't know if people get to see this. I've seen this in shopping malls. A kid stumbles and falls, the mom starts scolding the kid for being stupid. And then drags the kid up and they just yanks the kid out. I see that a lot in Singapore. I'm not saying I'm not saying it's everybody, but that's the opposite of what we want to do. And then the best is to go through the process with the kid.
How about two other speakers, your perspectives?
Okay, I try and answer the first one. Inevitable falling and stuff like that. So I'm going to bring back the inoculation theory. Okay, so the idea is that so as a parent, I'm a husband of one wife, father of 4 kids. So as a parent, I do set some boundaries for them to fall. So it's not like they have access to $10,000 and they fall means lose 10,000. It's not that kind of. So same as inoculation, right? You don't give the full dose of the virus to the person until he collapses in the hospital or something like that. So the idea is to allow them to fall, but also safeguard that process. So if you ask me, that was how I would respond if that were my kids, knowing that sometimes they fall, they learn from their consequences also. And to answer about the village, yes, so let me share you a personal anecdote. So I received this message for me to update my SingPass address or something like that. I suspected it's dubious, okay? But I wasn't very sure, okay? So I actually asked friends who I think who are tech savvy, who may know the scene a little bit better. Now, so what I'm trying to articulate is it may not be formal communities, but you may know someone, your friends or whatever, who may be plugged in to these sort of things, and then you ask accordingly. I have friends who are, for example, bankers and all that. So if I receive something that I'm not sure, I'll just ask them, hey, this one I got, is it legit, and things like that. Yeah. So in my family, I'm known as Mr. Cyber Wellness. My kids call me that. My parents also, everything they receive, hey, this one scam or not, the kind of thing. So I will look through, I say, looks legit because you might as well use the app, right? I always tell them, use the app. If it's the bank app, just use the app and transact through that. So what I'm trying to say that may not be formal communities, but I think all of us will have our kind of relationship with some friends who may be able to help in that situation. But I do advocate journeying this cyber era in a community. Yeah.
Thank you. Your perspectives, please.
First of all, the first question. I think it's very important to be engaged with kids, and as a parent or teacher or caregiver, to make sure that you know what platforms they are using. Because if they don't feel that you are aware or you are engaged, if they see something, if they face a threat, they might just think that you won't understand, or you won't you will blame them, and don't share about it. That's why I think it's important to be engaged, and of course, as it was said, set some rules, not have like total freedom of share whatever they want online, use multiple hundreds of platforms, whatever is out there. Make sure that you set some limits, and you are aware of what they are doing, what platforms they are using, and talk about it with kids to make sure that if something, if they share what they are normally saying, if they say something that's not very pleasant, they share that too. And talking about
second question,
communities. So I think the second question is, as we navigate the digital world that we live in, what's the importance of communities? I think Jhee shared his perspectives. I'd love to hear yours.
I totally agree that it's everyone has a role. The community can be like a family, or a school, or relatives, or even like the neighborhoods, like councils and the neighborhoods. And we have it's like, I mean, the culture is changing with introduction of cyberspace into our lives. How we have been passing like the lessons that we have learned from the past throughout the years and centuries to the new generation. Everyone had their own took their own part in this area. I believe that with the technologies that we have introduced into our lives these days, so still everyone's role to share about their experience, what they have learned from their from the maybe unpleasant experiences they had, being hacked, being scammed, share with friends, with colleagues, with children, with relatives, and help each other to learn how to cope with cyber threats as well.
Anything to add, Ethan?
For me, actually, I go back to why we ran this event. I think because we're trying to build a community, I think the attempt is at really getting people to have conversations around this. Again, having the conversations begins the whole journey. The other part about this is openness. I think they talked really quite well about this, where so one thing I've been learning a lot about is from a friend who is a CISO. He talked a lot about just culture, which is, where every time you make a mistake, you're rewarded for telling people your mistakes, because then people can learn from you. Of course, again, Asian culture is the opposite story, but what we want to do is to create a community where people get to share their stories, share their failures, so that everybody can learn and learn how to do better. And that's, I think, the most important part of this.
Thank you. I think what was very telling is a lot of times when we talk about community, it's about people we know, it's people we trust as friends, right? But technology has also allowed us to build a lot of communities where there's a lot of anonymity. We don't know who we are interacting with. So we got to navigate that with a little bit of caution. Unless you're playing across the causeway and want to know where they're checking on petrol, there are good Telegram groups on that. I think my boss has a question, so I can't say no.
Great. Thank you, Vignesh. So I'm putting off the hat as a boss, but the two practical questions. I think one is, as a parent, right? I'm very fascinated by G's idea of setting this little sort of examples for them to fall into the trap, so to speak, right? Can you share a little bit more about some of the practical takeaways that I, as a parent, can try that with my own children? Where are the safe space, some of the practical areas? Because what we are talking about in this whole cyber resilience is also a matter of security as well as a matter of well-being and cyberbullying. So maybe you can share a little bit more about the practical aspect as a parent. What are the sort of initiatives that I can sort of introduce with children of my own children? And the second question is also partly related to that, is if I put on the cap as a teacher in school, right? My school, I come from a developing context where the schools do not provide adequate training to children, right? Suddenly pandemic comes in, everyone goes on online classes, right? And we don't know what happened to the children after the online classes, right? So as an educator, a teacher, an individual teacher, are there any practical advice or suggestions that a teacher can do to interact with the children in their class, and some of the practical examples on how to engage them in all these different topics that we have talked about? Maybe, I mean, not only on G, but also with the other participants. Thank you.
Okay, so the first question, me, right? So, okay, so one of the things I look at is to understand the technological affordances of whatever that they're doing. So, for example, when my daughter started IG is Instagram, just in case. So when my daughter started IG, one of the things was I must be their friend. Okay, so that was one. I mean, obviously they can actually mix around, but there is some measure of monitoring, and the first picture they pull up is me and my daughter. Okay, so I have this for my kids lah. So this is an example where I don't just go do it on your own. So they can still practice, but there is some monitoring, some guidance in that aspect now. So this is one practical example. When I first started out with my daughters, partly also because of my experience, when I first started out with my daughters, they couldn't have data, so it was only Wi-Fi. So it's kind of only within the house or the school and things like that. So it's scaffolded. Once they have proven that they're responsible, I kind of release a little bit more. I give them data plan and things like that. So that's what I do with my kids. And these are some practical handles that I know some other parents do as well. Yeah. Then the other question, right.
I think I always go back to lead by example. Always go by, I think one of the biggest problems that we do face, I think I use this as Asian context, but it might happen everywhere else. Power distance between teachers and students. I think that's one of the biggest issues that we will face. Power distance meaning I have a lot more privileges than you because I'm more powerful than you in this context. And this is where the struggle of that conversation happens. Once students see a teacher as human and learn from the teacher directly, it is a major part of the education. So I think it is monkey see, monkey do. So again, if the teacher maintains and builds a relationship with the students, I think one of the key parts about this is really to be able to engage them in meaningful conversations, because now that you're human with them, and then you can share your resilience and your experiences with them. We are being given the very important notice. Let me hand it back
It was meant for me, but I was not looking at my phone. So the screen for everyone to see. But before we take the last minute to wrap up, Noushin, how about your perspectives on the two questions that Changda had asked?
Sure. First question. Sorry, I'm not a parent. I can give practical examples. For the second question, I think that when pandemic started and we rushed to online platforms, teachers and people in education sector, they were also being surprised. They did not receive proper education, like most of the people, like employees of different companies that were forced to take their laptops home and start working from home. They were not being educated on how to provide a safe environment for their like work laptops as well. So I guess now it's been a few years, and it's been more like stable, and we have found enough time to invest on educating educators and also kids to make them more safe online, teach them some like basic security practices that they can they should take into account when they go online. So
thank you very much, Noushin. Do you have any last points you'd like to make, Ethan or Jhee?
No, I just want to thank everybody for being here. I think it's great. Thank you.
So I normally end my talk to encourage parents, because I talk to parents, is to journey in a community. Okay, so yeah.
And on that note, sorry, ladies and gentlemen, please applaud for Jhee and the rest of the panel.
thank you.
So, ladies and gentlemen, I really like to take this opportunity to thank our three panelists, Noushin from Kaspersky Lab, Ethan from the Center for Cybersecurity, and Jhee from the Singapore Institute of Technology. Ladies and gentlemen, I think it was a real pleasure to have our three panelists join us today and for us to co-organize this event with Kaspersky Labs and with the Center for Cybersecurity. I think the HEAD Foundation is really honored for this opportunity to work together with these two very esteemed organizations as part of our HEAD Foundation Dialogue series. And as part of me making a quick plug about our HEAD Foundation Dialogue series, we have an upcoming event on the 18th of April. We are very, very fortunate to have a speaker, Tan Min Han. Some of you might be familiar with him, and I'm very sure many of you are familiar with his brother. Google it. I don't want to use his brother to publicize his talk, but Google it. But yeah, he's got a very interesting medtech solution on how we can use cancer for a medtech solution for early detection of cancer. So if possible, do join us for the talk. It will be both in person and available online. Those of you who are joining us and may like to join in person, do drop us a line and we'll try our level best to accommodate where possible. But if not, do join us online. So ladies and gentlemen, once again, it's been a real pleasure to have each and every one of you join us today, both in person and online, as part of this today's talk. And our partnership with Kaspersky and the Center for Cybersecurity, we hope will only deepen and give us more opportunities to work, not just in Singapore, but across the region, as we bring cybersecurity to our students, our parents, and our teachers. So thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Have a very pleasant evening. Goodbye.